This podcast is created with the support of artificial intelligence and is intended solely for entertainment and general listening purposes. The views, discussions, and opinions expressed in this podcast are not professional advice of any kind, including but not limited to educational, psychological, medical, financial, or legal advice. The hosts are not acting as licensed advisors, therapists, or consultants, and the content shared should not be considered a substitute for professional guidance. Every individual, child, family, and situation is unique. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from qualified professionals regarding their specific circumstances. By continuing to watch or listen, you acknowledge that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and any decisions or actions taken based on its content are the sole responsibility of the listener.
Welcome back to the Honest Insights podcast. I'm joining you as I do every week, wearing a few different hats, primarily as a teacher who sees the daily struggles of students, but also as a single father navigating the complexities of raising a human being on my own. This show was born out of a desire to have real, unfiltered conversations about the things that actually matter to our daily lives, and I'm glad you're here for the journey.
And I'm joining you from the perspective of a child psychologist and specialist in early years education. My days are spent looking at the why behind behavior and trying to bridge the gap between scientific research and the practical reality of living with and teaching children. We believe that by combining the boots-on-the-ground experience of a parent and educator with clinical insight, we can find some universal truths.
That's exactly it. We aren't here to give you a perfect manual, because that doesn't exist. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to remind everyone that if you find value in these long-form deep dives, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. It truly helps us keep these honest conversations going.
We are here with you every single Sunday with a brand new episode. Whether we're talking about education, psychology, or the various other topics we cover throughout the month, our goal is to leave you with at least one new perspective. Today, we're starting a massive exploration into parenting and education, beginning with how we actually build, or sometimes accidentally break, a child's confidence.
I want to start with something I see in the classroom almost every day. I'll give a student a difficult math problem, and before they even pick up their pencil, they look at me and say, "I can't do this." As a teacher, it breaks my heart, because I know they have the tools. But as a single father, I see that same spark of doubt at the dinner table, or when we're trying a new hobby at home. It makes me wonder where that "I can't" comes from so early on, and how we as the adults in the room are supposed to respond without just offering empty praise.
That "I can't" is often a defense mechanism against the fear of failure, and it's something we see crystallize very early in the developmental stages. From a psychological standpoint, confidence isn't actually the belief that you will succeed. It's the internal security of knowing you'll be okay even if you fail. When we see children freezing up, it's often because they've internalized the idea that their worth is tied to the result rather than the effort. In my practice, I see parents who are well-meaning but often praise the intelligence of the child rather than the process, which actually makes the child more afraid to try hard things because they don't want to lose that smart label.
I've definitely been guilty of that. It's so easy to say, "You're so smart," when they finish a puzzle or get a good grade, because you're proud of them and you want them to feel good. But I've noticed that in my classroom, the kids who are told they are smart are often the ones most terrified of the harder worksheets. They'll sit there in silence rather than risk making a mistake that proves they aren't smart after all. I've had to consciously shift my language to say things like, "I saw how you tried 3 different ways to solve that," which feels more honest, but it's a hard habit to break when you're tired and just want to encourage them.
It is a massive shift in mindset, moving from person praise to process praise. When you focus on the strategy, the persistence, or the focus the child showed, you're giving them a roadmap they can use again. If I tell a child they are naturally gifted at art, and then one day they can't draw a horse correctly, they feel like they've lost their gift. But if I say, "I love the way you use those different shades of blue to create the sky," they realize that their success came from a choice they made. That is the birth of true confidence, the realization that they have agency over their own improvement.
Being a single father has really highlighted the agency part for me, because I don't have a second person there to provide a good cop, bad cop balance. It's just me. I find that I have to be very careful not to overhelp. There's this urge when you see your child struggling with a zipper or a difficult homework question to just jump in and do it for them to save time and stress. But I've realized that every time I save them, I'm accidentally sending a message that I don't think they can handle it. It's a constant battle between my schedule as a busy teacher and my goal of raising someone who is self-reliant.
That's what we call scaffolding in education and psychology, and it's perhaps the hardest part of being a caregiver. It's about providing just enough support so the child can reach the next level, but not so much that you're doing the climbing for them. When you step in too early, you rob the child of the mastery experience. That moment where they finally get the zipper to work or finally understand the math concept is where the brain releases dopamine and wires itself to think, I am capable. If we take that moment away, we are essentially starving their confidence of its primary fuel.
It's also about the environment we create for mistakes. In my classroom, I try to celebrate when I make a mistake on the whiteboard. I'll intentionally misspell a word or miss a step in a calculation. And when a student points it out, I thank them and show them how I fix it. I try to do the same at home, showing that as a man and a father, I'm not perfect. I want them to see that confidence isn't about being right all the time. It's about what you do right after you realize you're wrong. Does that align with what you see in the early years development?
Absolutely. That is called modeling vulnerability. Children are like sponges. They don't just listen to what we say. They watch how we handle our own frustrations. If a parent or teacher gets angry or embarrassed when they make a mistake, the child learns that mistakes are shameful. But if you handle a burnt dinner or a missed turn while driving with a sense of humor and a problem-solving attitude, you are teaching them the most important component of confidence, resilience. We have to show them that a mistake is just a data point, not a definition of who they are.
Moving from the idea of internal confidence, I want to talk about a specific barrier to that confidence I see in my classroom every year: language. I teach a lot of students where English is their second or even third language. I see the look on a child's face when they have a brilliant idea, but simply don't have the English vocabulary to export it from their brain to the class. As a single father, I often think about the pressure on parents to keep up with the school's language at home. There's this fear that if they don't speak English at the dinner table, they're somehow holding their child back. What does the psychology say about that pressure?
It's a very common and very heavy burden for parents to carry. From a developmental perspective, the most important thing a parent can provide is a rich language environment, regardless of which language that is. If a parent is forcing themselves to speak English at home, but their own English is limited or they feel uncomfortable using it, the quality of interaction actually drops. They stop using complex metaphors, they stop telling nuanced stories, and they stop expressing deep emotions because they are focused on grammar. I always tell parents, speak the language of your heart at home. If you provide a strong foundation in your native tongue, the child's brain develops the hooks necessary to hang a second language on later.
That is such a relief to hear, and I think a lot of the parents I work with need to hear that. In the classroom, I notice that the students who are most successful aren't necessarily the ones who speak English 24/7. They're the ones who are encouraged to be curious about words in general. I try to create a bridge where I ask them how a certain concept is said in their whole language. It validates their identity. But I worry about the silent period, that phase where a child just stops talking for months while they're absorbing a new language. As a parent, that can be terrifying. You feel like you're losing your connection to your child because they've gone quiet.
The silent period is a perfectly natural neurological process, but you're right, it is emotionally taxing for the caregiver. During this time, the child's brain is working overtime. It's like they are downloading a massive software update. They are listening, processing syntax, and mapping sounds. As a psychologist, I encourage parents to use nonverbal scaffolding during this phase. Use more gestures, use more visual aid at home, and most importantly, don't pressure them to perform the new language. When we force a child to say it in English before they are ready, we create an association between the new language and high-level anxiety. We want the new language to feel like a gift, not a test.
I see that test anxiety even with my own child, and we only speak one language at home. I can only imagine the layers of complexity when you add a second language to the mix. One thing I've tried to implement as a teacher, and I try to share this with the fathers I meet, is the idea of parallel play through audiobooks or music in the target language. Even as a busy single parent, I can put on a story while we're making dinner.
It takes the pressure off me to be the tutor and allows us to just be listeners together. It turns learning into a shared passive experience rather than a chore.
That is a brilliant strategy because it lowers the affective filter. That's a term we use to describe the invisible screen that goes up when a learner is stressed, bored, or self-conscious. When the filter is high, information can't get in. By using music or stories when you're just being together, you're lowering that filter. I also want to touch on the emotional vocabulary. Even if a child is becoming fluent in English at school, they need to know how to express "I'm frustrated" or "I feel lonely" in the language they feel most safe in. If we lose the home language too quickly, we risk losing the child's ability to communicate their deepest needs to their parents during those critical teenage years.
That's a powerful point. It's about long-term connection, not just passing a spelling test next Friday. I realized that my job as a father isn't to be a second school teacher, it's to be the safe harbor. If I spend all my time correcting grammar or pushing for academic progress, I'm not providing that emotional safety. I think for any parent listening who is struggling with ESL or any educational barrier, your relationship is the soil and the learning is the plant. If the soil is dry and stressed, nothing is going to grow well, no matter how much educational water you pour on it.
Exactly. And for the educators listening, the best thing you can do for an ESL student is to honor the culture they come from. When a child feels that their home life is respected in the classroom, their confidence soars. And as we discussed in our first segment, confidence is the engine of all learning. It's a beautiful cycle when it works correctly. The child feels secure in their identity, which gives them the courage to take risks with a new language, which in turn expands their world. It all starts with us letting go of the need for perfect and embracing the honest process of growth.
As a teacher, I often say that I don't just teach math or history, I teach emotional regulation, whether I want to or not. I can tell the second a student walks through my door if they've had a rough morning at home or if there's a conflict brewing in the hallway. But as a single father, I'll be honest, sometimes I'm so focused on the logistics of survival, like getting the laundry done or making sure the lunches are packed, that I miss the subtle emotional shifts in my own home. I've had those nights where my child is being difficult about something small, like the wrong colored cup, and I realized too late that it wasn't about the cup at all. It was about a hidden stressor I didn't take the time to see. How do we train our eyes to see what's beneath the surface?
That is the iceberg model of behavior, and it's something every parent and educator should keep in their mental toolkit. The behavior we see, the yelling, the stubbornness, or even the withdrawal, is just the 10% above the water. The other 90% is what's happening underneath: fear, exhaustion, a lack of agency, or perhaps a feeling of disconnection. For you, as a single father, the pressure is doubled because you are the only mirror your child has at home to reflect their emotions back to them. When they are acting out, they are often just trying to find where the boundaries are so they can feel safe. They aren't trying to give you a hard time. They are having a hard time. If we can shift our perspective from "how do I stop this behavior" to "what is this behavior trying to tell me?", the entire dynamic changes.
It's so much harder to do that when you're the one in the line of fire, though. In the classroom, I have the benefit of professional distance. I can see a student throwing a pen and think, okay, they are frustrated with this task. But at home, when it's my own child and I'm already exhausted from a 10-hour workday, that same behavior feels personal. It feels like a failure of my parenting. I think a lot of parents feel that guilt, that if our kids aren't happy or well-behaved all the time, we've missed a step. We spend so much energy trying to fix their sadness or their anger, instead of just letting them sit with it.
That fixing reflex is actually a form of our own anxiety. We don't like seeing our children in pain because it triggers our own stress response, so we try to shut the emotion down quickly with logic or distractions. But from a child psychology perspective, that is a missed opportunity for co-regulation. Co-regulation is the process where we use our calm to settle their storm. If we meet their fire with our own fire, the house just burns down. But if we can stay regulated, even if it means taking a deep breath and saying, "I can see you're really upset right now, and I'm right here with you," we are literally teaching their nervous system how to calm itself down. Over time, they internalize your calm, and that becomes their self-regulation.
I've started trying this technique in my classroom where we have a reset corner. It's not a timeout or a punishment. It's just a place where a student can go if they feel their lid is about to flip, as we say. I try to explain to them that their brain is a biological organ that can get overwhelmed, just like a muscle can get tired. Bringing that home as a single father has been transformative. Instead of sending my child to their room as a punishment, I might say, "I'm feeling a bit frustrated right now, and I think you are too. Let's both take 5 minutes to reset, and then we'll try this conversation again." It shows them that I'm human too. It models the fact that even adults have to manage big feelings.
That is exactly what they need to see. We often try to be these perfect stoic figures for our children, but that actually makes them feel more alienated when they can't control their own emotions. By narrating your own emotional process, you're giving them a vocabulary for theirs. We also have to remember that emotional support often looks like silence. It looks like sitting on the floor next to them while they cry about something insignificant and not trying to talk them out of it. In child psychology, we call it holding the space. It's the message that says, "Your big emotions are not too big for me. I can handle your anger. I can handle your sadness. You are safe here."
It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think for those of us in education or single parenting, we have to realize that some days we're going to fail at this. Some days I'm going to lose my cool, and some days my students are going to have meltdowns that I can't co-regulate away. But I've learned that the repair is actually more important than being perfect. Going back to my child or my student and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry I raised my voice earlier. I was stressed and I should have handled it better," does more for their emotional development than 1,000 perfect days ever could.
This leads us directly into one of the biggest emotional triggers in modern homes, the screen. Whether it's a tablet, a phone, or a gaming console, it feels like a constant battle for attention. As a teacher, I see the digital hangover in my morning classes. Kids who are lethargic or irritable because they were up late on TikTok. As a father, I know the temptation of the digital pacifier. When I have 20 emails to answer and dinner is burning, giving my child a screen feels like the only way to get 5 minutes of peace. But the guilt that follows is real. How do we navigate this without feeling like we're failing the tech war? The guilt is a result of the all-or-nothing narrative we see online. We're told screens are rot for the brain, yet our entire society runs on them. From a neurological standpoint, the issue isn't necessarily the screen itself, but what the screen replaces. If the screen replaces sleep, physical movement, or face-to-face social interaction, then we have a problem. The dopamine loops in these apps are designed to be sticky. They are literally engineered by psychologists to be hard to put down. So when we ask a child to turn it off and they have a meltdown, they aren't being bad, they are experiencing a massive dopamine crash.
We have so much more to dive into today, including the mistakes we all make as parents without even realizing it. But before we move to the next segment, if you're finding these insights helpful, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe.
We release a deep dive conversation like this every Sunday, covering everything from child psychology to the broader topics that shape our lives. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you have a story about language learning in your home or a question about building confidence, leave a comment below. We read them, and they often inspire our future topics. Now, let's move on to a topic that I know every parent listening is currently wrestling with: the battle of screen time.
This leads us directly into one of the biggest emotional triggers in modern homes: the screen. Whether it's a tablet, a phone, or a gaming console, it feels like a constant battle for attention. As a teacher, I see that digital hangover in my morning classes: kids who are lethargic or irritable because they were up late on TikTok. As a father, I know the temptation of the digital pacifier. When I have 20 emails to answer and dinner is burning, giving my child a screen feels like the only way to get 5 minutes of peace. But the guilt that follows is real. How do we navigate this without feeling like we're failing the tech war?
The guilt is a result of the all-or-nothing narrative we see online. We're told screens are rot for the brain, yet our entire society runs on them. From a neurological standpoint, the issue isn't necessarily the screen itself, but what the screen replaces. If the screen replaces sleep, physical movement, or face-to-face social interaction, then we have a problem. The dopamine loops in these apps are designed to be sticky. They are literally engineered by psychologists to be hard to put down. So when we ask a child to turn it off and they have a meltdown, they aren't being bad. They are experiencing a massive dopamine crash.
I see that dopamine crash play out in real time during my first period class. If a student has been on a high-stimulation game or scrolling through short-form videos right before the bell rings, asking them to then focus on a slow task, like reading a physical book or solving a long-form math problem, is like asking someone who just got off a roller coaster to sit perfectly still and meditate.
Their brains are literally vibrating, looking for the next hit of novelty. As a single father, I've had to learn the hard way that the 5-minute warning isn't just a polite suggestion, it's a necessary neurological bridge. If I just walk over and turn the TV off mid-scene, I'm basically pulling the plug on their brain's current supply of joy, and the explosion that follows is almost guaranteed.
You hit on a crucial point there, the velocity of information. Digital media moves at a speed that the human brain didn't evolve to process for hours on end. When a child is used to a scene change every 3 seconds in a video, the real world starts to feel incredibly boring and sluggish. To help with that crash you mentioned, I often recommend a technique called bridging. Instead of just turning the device off, sit with them for the last 2 minutes. Ask them what they are watching or what level they are on. This brings them out of the digital trance and back into a social connection with you before the screen actually goes dark. It makes the transition a shared experience, rather than an executive command from an enemy figure.
That's a game changer for me, because honestly, as a parent, I often use that screen time as my own break time. I'm in the kitchen or the other room, and my instinct is to just shout from the hallway, "Electronics off in 5 minutes." But when I do that, I'm disconnected from what they are experiencing. I've noticed that when I actually take those 2 minutes to sit down, even if I'm exhausted, and say, "Wow, that's a cool character you built," the transition is 80% smoother. It stops being me versus the screen and starts being me joining their world for a moment before we move on to dinner or bed. In the classroom, I try to do the same by giving soft starts to the day, allowing for a bit of social chatter before we dive into the heavy curriculum.
That's exactly it. We also have to look at the quality of the digital nutrition. Just like we distinguish between a bowl of candy and a bowl of fruit, we need to distinguish between passive and active screen time. Passive time is the mindless scrolling or auto-playing videos. This is where the brain essentially goes into a low-frequency state. Active time is when they are coding, creating digital art, or even strategizing in a complex game. As a psychologist, I'm much less worried about a child who spends 2 hours building an intricate city in a sandbox game than I am about a child who spends 30 minutes in a hypnotic scroll. One is building cognitive muscles, the other is just consuming.
I love that digital nutrition analogy. I'm going to use that at my next parent-teacher conference. I see kids who are tech-savvy, but digitally illiterate. They know how to find a video, but they don't know how to use the tool to solve a problem. One thing I struggle with as a single father, though, is the comparison trap. I see other families who claim they have 0 screen households, and I feel like I'm failing because we use them. But then I realize those households often have 2 parents, a nanny, or a massive support system. For me, sometimes that 30 minutes of educational programming is the only reason a healthy home-cooked meal actually gets on the table.
We have to strip away the shame. Shame is the enemy of good parenting. If you are using a screen as a tool to help you manage a household on your own, that is a survival strategy, not a moral failing. The goal isn't 0 screens. The goal is intentional screens. If the screen is on, know why it's on. Is it for a break? Is it for learning? Is it for a shared family movie night? The danger is when the screen becomes the default background noise of your life. When the TV is on just because, it creates a constant low-level distraction that prevents the deep, quiet moments where children actually do their best thinking and processing.
That background noise is something I've had to be very intentional about. I've started implementing a digital sunset in our house. At a certain hour, all devices, including mine, go into a charging station in the kitchen. It's been harder for me than it has been for my child, if I'm being honest. I find myself reaching for my phone to check school emails or the news. But seeing me put my phone away sends a more powerful message than any lecture I could give. It says, you are more important than this device.
That modeling is everything. If we are telling our kids to get off their tablets while we are scrolling through our own phones, we are sending a conflicting message that they are very quick to pick up on. By creating those sacred spaces, like the dinner table or the hour before bed, where technology simply doesn't exist, you are protecting the child's ability to engage with their own inner world. And that, ultimately, is where confidence and emotional intelligence are born. It's in the quiet spaces, not the digital ones.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from confidence to screens, but I want to get into the blind spots. As a teacher, I see the results of these mistakes when kids reach my classroom. And as a single father, I've caught myself making them more times than I'd like to admit. One of the biggest ones I see, and I'm guilty of it too, is the perfectionism trap. We want our kids to look successful,
because we feel like their success is a direct reflection of our worth as parents. In the classroom, I see kids who are so afraid of getting a B or making a mistake in front of their peers that they've lost the joy of actually learning. They aren't curious anymore. They are just performing for an audience of adults.
That performance is a huge psychological burden for a child to carry. When we inadvertently tie our affection or our pride to their achievements, we are creating what we call conditional self-esteem. The child starts to believe, I am only worthy of love when I am winning, when I am quiet, or when I am getting top marks. One of the most common mistakes I see in my practice is parents rescuing their children from every minor discomfort. Whether it's bringing a forgotten lunch to school for the third time in a week, or calling a teacher to argue about a grade, we are robbing them of the chance to develop frustration tolerance. If they never experience the natural consequences of a mistake while the stakes are low, they will have no idea how to handle a real crisis when they are adults.
I call that lawnmower parenting in the staff room. Parents who try to mow down every obstacle before their child even reaches it. I've had to catch myself doing this at home. Because I'm a single father, I sometimes feel this extra pressure to make sure everything is smooth, so they don't feel the absence of a second parent as much. But I realized that by making life too easy, I was actually making them fragile. I remember a moment where I stopped myself from fixing a broken toy and instead sat back and watched them try to figure it out. It was painful to watch the frustration, but the look of triumph on their face when they finally clicked it back together was worth more than 1,000 perfect days.
That watching the struggle is one of the hardest parts of being a caregiver, but it is also the most loving thing you can do. Another invisible mistake is the glorification of busy. We live in a culture where we feel like if our kids aren't in 3 different after-school clubs, sports, and tutoring, we are failing them. But children desperately need white space in their schedules. They need time to be bored, because boredom is the birthplace of imagination and self-reflection. When we overschedule them, we are essentially training them to be input dependent. They always need an adult or an activity to tell them what to do next. They never learn how to just be with themselves.
I see that exhaustion in my students every Friday afternoon. They are physically there, but mentally they've checked out because they've been on since 7 a.m. I've started advocating for low-stakes weekends at home, where we don't have a set plan. It was uncomfortable at first. The "I'm bored" complaints were constant, but eventually that boredom turned into drawing, or building something out of old boxes, or just a long conversation about nothing in particular. It's in those nothing moments that I feel like I'm actually doing my best parenting. I think we also make the mistake of talking at our children rather than with them. We spend so much time instructing and correcting that we forget to just listen to their perspective on the world.
That shift from instruction to inquiry is vital. Instead of saying, don't do that, we can ask, what was your goal when you did that? It changes the dynamic from a power struggle to a collaboration. The final mistake I want to mention is emotional invalidation. It's so easy to say, you're fine, or it's not a big deal, when a child is crying over something that seems small to us. But to them, in their world, it is a big deal. When we dismiss their feelings, we teach them to distrust their own internal compass. Our job isn't to tell them how they should feel. Our job is to help them navigate the feelings they actually have.
It really comes back to that honest insight we've been talking about all day. Being a parent or a teacher isn't about being an expert who has all the answers. It's about being a guide who is willing to walk alongside the child, even when the path is messy. I hope that by sharing my own stumbles as a single father and teacher, and hearing your clinical perspective, we've given the people listening a bit of permission to be imperfect today. It's in our imperfections that we actually connect with our kids.
This brings us to the end of our deep dive into parenting and education, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. We've touched on so many layers today, and we hope you found something that resonates with your own life, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just someone interested in the human experience.
Thank you for spending these last 30 minutes with us. It's a privilege to be part of your Sunday routine. If you found this episode valuable, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the Honest Insights podcast.
And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We are here every single Sunday with a brand new topic. Next week, we'll be stepping away from education to look at a completely different aspect of our daily lives, and we can't wait to share it with you.
Our mission is to keep these conversations real, unfiltered, and helpful. If you have a thought on today's parenting mistakes or a topic you want us to cover in the future, please leave a comment below. We love hearing your insights as much as we love sharing ours.
Until next Sunday, stay curious and be kind to yourself.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.